Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Are We Idiots Show, as we are all practicing social distancing in an effort to reduce the effects of coronavirus. Of course, that goes for Rich and I, too, as it relates to our show. We're not epidemiologists or virologists or public health experts, so we felt that an episode about coronavirus specifically would really not add any value. Certainly that information's out on any number of places. It's 24/7 everywhere if you want to get that information. What we can offer is a segment from our past episode that will help you with your finances once this nightmare ends. More specifically, not many pundits are talking about how we as a society are in full economic meltdown. As we tape this, we're only 10 days into restriction of our movements. And essentially 10 days of no income or no revenue from a business has led to chaos. So why do you think that is? How is it that we've cratered so quickly? Well, it's unpopular to say, but in generations past, it was well known that one had to, quote, save for a rainy day. And guess what? It's pouring rain. And a high percentage of American households and businesses have not saved. It should be no big deal if we all had savings, businesses and households, if the government told us to go home for 30 days or even 60 days. It shouldn't be catastrophic. In personal finance, most experts say that you should have at least 3 months and hopefully 6 months living expenses available in savings. And of course, in businesses, that same mantra should hold. And again, it may not help a lot of us now in this current situation if you haven't done that. And maybe it's even offensive to hear someone point this out. But hopefully this is a wake-up call to households and businesses to know that in the future, it will rain again. It may be a virus. It may be a real estate crash. It may be a tech bubble. It may be a war or terrorism, or any number of other shocks that we can't yet envision. But it will rain, I can assure you. We should remember this time. When you're able, repair your finances so that you have an emergency fund that you can cover your expenses for many, many months. If you're not sure how to even begin repairing your finances, I direct you to our episode 36, Personal Finance Basics, which was from November of 2018. We go over the need for basic finance and developing a budget. And frankly, we emphasize the mantra that you must learn to live on less than you make, regardless of what you make. If you make, we see it with entertainers and athletes. If you make $10 million a year, you can spend it. You have to find a way to live on less than you make, period. Before we replay a segment from our Retirees Are Not Money Managers episode that was from last September, I would like to suggest some short-term cost-cutting hints to help get through the immediate next few weeks and months, particularly if you've lost your job. Number one, if you're paying a gym membership that is closed, cancel that membership and any other service or membership that you can't use currently. Two, learn to cook. The reality is cooking at home is much cheaper than going out or ordering out. Yes, you can get food delivered during the crisis, and yes, if you can afford it, that might be a good thing to do to help sustain those restaurants. But if your funds are tight and you can't afford it, that's not your responsibility to keep those restaurants open. That's their responsibility. Plus, frankly, if you eat out and order out a lot, that's probably not the healthiest of food. Cooking at home almost certainly would be healthier for you if you learn to do it right. 3, if you have time, use this time to compare all your other services and insurances to make sure you're getting the best price. These are all very competitive industries. So cable and internet bills, mobile phone service, car insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance, and certainly mortgage rates. You may be able to refinance now. These services, again, are all very competitive. You might be able to save hundreds of dollars per month, which leads to thousands of dollars per year. Fourth, do some belt tightening and tell yourself you have to live without something that you want. Maybe that's a streaming service. Maybe that's a premium beer instead of a pedestrian beer. I don't know what it could be. There's something, maybe your wife's favorite cosmetic. Who knows? But there's got to be something, if you look at how you spend your money, that you can cut out and you can live fine without it. Fifth, and maybe this is only if it goes for many months, but if you have, a lot of Americans have car loans. I think we mentioned on a previous show that 80 to 85% of new vehicles are purchased using either a lease or a car loan. If you have that, and you can get out of it or sell it and get out of the lease or trade in the lease or whatever, get someone to take over your lease, and you can buy a cheap car for a few $1,000s cash, get rid of that car payment. The bottom line is, folks, the government may be returning you a small portion of your taxes as a token over the next couple of weeks. $1,000 they're talking about, $1,200, whatever it is. If you're in low income, if you're in higher income, you might not get anything. But the bottom line is, you can't rely on the government to sustain your family. You have to take care of your loved ones. It's up to you to find a way to figure this out. So Godspeed all. Stay safe. We'll get through this, and we'll get back with our listeners with new episodes of the Are We Idiots show as soon as we're able to. And in the meantime, please enjoy this segment from our past episode. All right, folks, we're going to move on to retirees are not money managers. And so I need to explain how this came about, as I often do. So, Richie, I'm 55 years old, as is my wife.
You don't look a day over 54.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to be 56 soon. But anyhow, I'm kind of a planner. I'm kind of anal. I'm all these things that I'm sure you've heard on the show before. But so I have no idea. My wife and I have no idea. We've talked about this off air, that we have no idea what our retirement is going to look like. We have no idea when we're going to retire. We have no idea what we want to do and retire, where we want to live. We don't know if we want to retire, all this stuff. But even with that, I've built out a couple different financial scenarios. So I've built a budget, multiple budgets for different dollar amounts per year for when we retire. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know, whatever. But just so I can get an idea of what a budget would look like in retirement. And I've projected with our buckets of monies, where we might be in 7 years as far as an asset amount. So we go and talk to some financial planners, right? And so pretty much they're all very similar. Now, anyone listening to this will probably say, well, no, I'm different or whatever. But basically, when you plan for a 25 or 30-year retirement, you make certain assumptions. And usually it's based on certain market returns for a certain risk profile. A lot of people will say you can count on 7% if you're in mostly stocks, or a more conservative would be 4% or something like that, right? You can't leave it all in cash because you're laughing already at me because I'm nerding out on you, right?
Is one of your potential outcomes involve a bomb shelter for your retirement?
No, but I do have cash, in case the banks go down. So I do have some cash on hand. But anyhow, let me just finish the thought. So basically, they all build out these scenarios, and they say this is what you should assume, and this is what your nest egg will do, and this is what you can draw down, yada yada yada. To which my question was, I'm kind of a skeptic sometimes. I say, well, what happens if it doesn't turn out that way? And they're all like, long-term returns in the market have been, for 80 years, they've been 7%, whatever. I said, well, yeah, but what happens if you get a downturn when you first retire, or for several years of your first retire? Just to give the listeners an example. So between 2000 and 2014 or so, it's been about 14 years, the S&P returns were zero. So there was a recession in 99 or 2000, right? And it took 8 years to get back to level. Then there was the 2008 recession. It took another 6 years to get back to level. So, the reality is that it has a lot to do with the timing of when you retire and what the market is doing and then what it's going to do in the future. So that's where I'd like to start, Richie, this show is not about people not saving enough for retirement. We on the IGN show, the Immediate Gratification Nation show, go back and listen to that. It was a good one, folks, early on in our career. And then we did a personal finance show last fall, which was also a very popular show. And we highlighted on those shows that people are just not saving enough for retirement. They're not budgeting. 40% of the people don't even save for retirement. What this show is about, and the podcast audience is very affluent, so probably it'll hit home with many of our listeners, is how do you manage your money and how do you project how to manage your money when most people don't have pensions anymore? When our parents retired, most of them had pensions, private pensions. We all are responsible for managing our own retirement monies, and we're not good at it. So that was a long setup, Richie.
Well, first of all, let me give me a little shock to the system to wake up again.
Were you even listening?
I missed most of it. So let me ask you this. If you were traveling down the road in your Maserati at the speed of light and you turned on your lights, would anything happen?
Yeah.
What would happen?
The lights would come on.
But
they wouldn't shine out, right? But they would be on. I mean,
you really don't know the answer to the question.
Correct.
Neither does any financial advisor as far as to what the future holds with what if there's a recession 5 years from now or a nuclear war 10 years from now.
That's exactly right. And that's why I'm skeptical, because let's face it, there's the other show that we talked about, the fake news show. We talked about what do you have to do with any information? You have to just go back and ask the second level, third level questions and look at what is their incentives, right? What are the incentives of the people that are trying to get you to leave your money with them? They get paid. They get paid a percentage of whatever they manage, right? So you should always be skeptical of looking at people's incentives. And people that want to manage your money in retirement get paid on it. Whether it's, whether they get paid, they probably get a percentage amount just to manage it. And then some depending on how much money you have, some get 2 and 10. There's all kinds of different models. But either way, they're doing it for the money. So you have to be wary of their incentives.
Are you going to ramble on the whole show without letting me talk?
No, you took a breath, so I jumped in.
You asked me to answer a question. I gave you 14 words.
What do you think about the premise?
All right.
The premise of the show.
There's going to be a lot of dissertations and lectures from my buddy Mark Weaver today. The reality is, I could probably simplify this whole show in 5 minutes, but then there wouldn't be a show. So
I doubt it. You're very ill-educated when it comes to this stuff. You're not very well informed.
No, I am well informed. I'm just not well executed. I haven't. Okay.
You know the theory, just not the practice.
Correct. So traditionally, money managers are taught just slow and steady wins the race. Stick with it, and the earlier you stick with it, the more you'll have, and you'll survive highs and lows, or the lows, and it'll all be good. But I believe that is true, but over a wide sample of time, right? So I think it's become a lot of luck and timing. Now, you still have to do the fundamentals. Without it, you have nothing.
Right.
But I know some people that retired right around that 08, 09 period.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, my goodness.
It almost dropped 40%.
I remember even my dad saying, my monthly check from his retirement fund set up through Rosemont College at the time, like it was down substantially,
right,
40%, and he had nothing to do with it. He
right.
did everything right.
Right.
So you can still do everything right and come up short based on luck and timing of circumstances.
Right. But isn't that scary? I mean, the number one fear of people as they age is running out of money. And it's a very common thing. People have money worries, and we've already talked about it that 40% of the country probably won't have any kind of retirement, which is really sad. But even the ones that have a decent amount of savings, or some that even have a lot of savings, and maybe the ones that have, $10 million, they're not going to worry either way, but they'll be able to survive. But they still may do a poor job of managing their finances because we can't really project how things are going to turn out. And it's pretty hard to plan. For a planner like me or planners that are listening out there, it's kind of hard because in the old days, I think it was in the 80s, there was over 50% or 60% of the people had private pensions. Now that's down. The people that are going to retire next year, I think they'll have about 19% of them will have a private pension. And it's dwindling every year. So in the old days, our parents' generation, they got checks, right? And it was a big pool of money that professional money managers managed, and they knew to not sell when the market sells off. They got to stay and hold on there. But a lot of people that are going to be managing their own money, there's a lot of emotion involved. If you're 75 years old and your portfolio drops by 40% in the stock market, it's only in hindsight that it's going to go back up. It may not. It may not for years, like we illustrate, 8 years, 6 years, whatever.
Well, to that point, and you know the history of the stock market better than I do. In the last 80 years, how many periods of 14 years has there basically been zero returns?
Not many. But I would also say that it's really, really hard to compare the 30s and the 50s with the more recent times. I think the more recent times are more valid samples because it's more representative of our global world today.
Well, and it's,
don't you think?
And it's, reality. It's really what only we care about. I don't care about.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't even care about the last 14 years. I care about the future.
So put it this way: a new college graduate who entered the workforce in, say, 2009. Right. 10 years later, thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. He's probably quadrupled his investment, right?
Right.
Now, somebody who jumped in 2000
right.
could be dead broke.
Yeah.
So, again, it's a lot of luck and timing. But the reason why I'm asking is today's world a lot more volatile than it used to be.
Right. And we'll talk about that in the latter half of this segment because I think there's some fundamental problems with the global money system and global debt crisis, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But just a little bit
Mark,
more.
Can I call you Mark?
You can.
I'd like to hear from you
right.
versus trying to put me to sleep. You raised a good point. What happens if my timing's off? What do I do? The same question you asked the financial advisor who couldn't answer it. So I think you got to start with the basics, which is put money away, which most people don't till it's too late. We discussed why, because everyone thinks that who cares when you're 20 or 30, you have plenty of time to make it up.
That's your theory. My theory is people are not using budgets and
they're
not
both.
disciplined.
They're not educated on it. They don't. Yes, that's part of it. But the majority of people think, I have time to make up. Why would I start putting $50 a week away when I'm 22 and I need that money for drinking and partying, etc.? But even if you do the right things, which I'm a strong believer in the slow and steady course because I have not done a good job of it either. What are some of the, and I don't want to jump ahead in your prezo because I know you're very regimented, so I might be taking you out of your systematic approach today, but what are the hedges or alternatives to prepare for a downturn when you turn 62, 64, 65 and you want to retire and it's a bad time of year in the market for that?
Well, I am not a professional money manager, which probably makes me, ill-equipped to do this. But there are plenty of hedges. There's commodities. There's gold. There's oil stocks. There's silver. There's different ways to hedge. There's obviously different bonds and what have you. But the reality is that I'm not going to be capable of, because I'm not in the industry of timing the market. And it's really bad. It's a really bad idea to try to think you're smarter than the market and try to time it. The reality is that you need to have a long-term view, and you need to have some in retirement. You need to have some short-term monies, and that's the recipe, right? You gotta have some invested in stocks to try to get the return. if your emotional well-being is affected by the risks of that, then maybe that's not for you, and you got to be in all cash. You just got to save enough to have enough to live. You can also do rental real estate. I mean, there's all kinds of different.
Let me ask you about cash. Okay,
Right.
you just gave 10 great examples. That answers the question. At least for people to start thinking about other means to protect themselves. Are you a believer in, as you get closer to 55, 60, going more and more into cash savings?
Well, again, it's an individual decision, but yes, I mean, I think that, and almost all money managers would say that when you're younger, you should have a portfolio of mostly high growth stocks, international stocks, what have you. And as you get closer to retirement, you mix in more bonds, you mix in some cash. Right now the market's at a 10-year high or all-time highs. How much more upside does it have? There's a lot of professional money managers. I watch CNBC a lot. There's a lot of people that are moving stuff to cash. But it's a really bad idea to try to time the market because, let's face it, nobody knows. The people on TV, the experts, the Fed, everyone, the CEOs. Trump doesn't know. He especially doesn't know. Here's an example I did, Richie. So I took a nest egg money. This was from my retirement spreadsheet. I'm not going to reveal actual numbers, but I had a nest egg scenario at 4%. And a nest egg scenario at 7% return projected out till I'm 90, right?
90?
Yeah.
Wow, that's being generous.
If you live to 65 nowadays, there's a good chance you'll make 90. Anyhow, at 4% return, if you have a flat return for the first 10 years of that retirement, your principal drops by 40%.
Because of cost of living?
No, because you don't get the compounded rate at the higher dollar amounts. At 7%, in the 7% return, it drops about 50%. So in 10 years of flat returns, like we just described happened in the 2000s, you can have half as much money. If your portfolio is built on a 7% return and you get 10 years of flat returns, you might have half as much money in your nest egg than you thought.
Because of what you spent?
You have to spend. You're basing on a drawdown.
For the benefit of the listeners, because I get it completely.
Right.
For the benefit of the listeners who don't understand what you just said, can you explain it?
So let's say again, we're talking about people that are managing and living off their own savings from retirement, not people that don't have a pension. We're not talking about Social Security. Social Security is a small part of your retirement. But if you're managing, let's say you had X amount of dollars, and that is what you're going to draw down and live on, and you assume a certain rate of return on that nest egg, and that makes money each year, and then you draw money off of it. But a lot of scenarios are built on 4 or 6, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7% returns.
Is it this common sense? For instance, if I have $200,000 saved,
right,
and I spend $20,000 a year,
right,
my retirement with 0 returns will run out in 10 years.
Correct.
Is that what you're trying to tell us?
That's what I'm trying to say. But obviously,
what are you, Captain Obvious?
Well, no, but people. What we're talking about here is people that have to manage their own money. They're assuming a certain rate of return to project out for. They've built these scenarios. That's what these financial planners do. That's what they all do.
So you're educating on.
What if
you have 0% return?
Yeah.
How much money?
Has happened twice in the last 20 years.
How much money would you need in that scenario?
Yeah.
Okay.
You could be grossly underestimating what you need. Now, again, I'm just positing a theory. You like that word?
Depositing or
no,
positing?
P-O-S-I-T.
Got it. Posit.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm acknowledging I have no idea what's going to happen. And by the way, so financial planners that say that you can count on 7%, and then when you say, "Are you sure?" they say, "Well, of course, past performance is no indication of future performance." Nobody knows, right? And all I'm saying is we should think about this. Don't listen to the financial professionals that say, "Yeah, you can count on this," because at the end of the day, they're incentivized to get your money, and I think you have to be prepared for alternative scenarios. And this goes back to what we said on our personal finance show, Richie. The best protection you have is to be willing to adjust your lifestyle. You and I talked about that.
Or dying early.
Well, that is a surefire way to not need any more money. No, but I mean, I think if you're willing to adjust your lifestyle, and this probably will tie into the latter part of the show, then that is a comfort that, okay, so let's say you had budgeted to live on $150,000 a year, and now you have to live on 75. Well, that's a drastic change. But if you're willing to go from a retirement golf community to a 2-bedroom, apartment somewhere in town, and you can be perfectly happy, that's fine. And that's what may happen with a lot of these people. If the global economy turns down, and we'll go to that next, then they may have to make different decisions. Any thoughts on that?
I just crapped my pants. I'm thinking about...
Were you skiing again?
I may have to cancel all my ski trips. You got me a little nervous now about my retirement because, first of all, if I have to spend $75,000 a year, I'm doing something wrong. Hopefully, mortgages are paid off and things like that.
Yeah, but $75,000 is not much if you're paying for your own medical care and stuff like that. So,
well, then I got to leave this show right now.
There's a Burger King up the street they're hiring.
And start something new.
No, but I mean, I know what you're probably thinking that I am crazy, and that most people, the overwhelming majority of people, are not thinking about it in this level of detail. Is that what you're thinking?
I don't think you're crazy.
Yeah, I see it in your face.
Anal, paranoid, overprotective, regimented, tight. Yeah, but not crazy.
Every other adjective.
No, you know what? It's a great topic. It's actually scary when you think about it. I'm sure most people, if they were to look at this, go, I'm not going to make it. And
I've talked to a bunch of people, or friends and friends of friends, about some of this stuff over the last year or so, and it was surprising to me. These are people that have saved money for retirement. It's surprising to me. I'm not going to name names, but there was a lot of them that haven't really thought that much about retirement, which surprised me, because they're going to be responsible for managing their own money and investing their own money and managing risk. And the overwhelming majority of us are going to be responsible for doing this. And this is in a country where most people, don't keep budgets, don't spend more than they make. They have negative net worths. A high percentage of people are not saving for retirement. So there's a lot of worries.
Yeah, I just got 3 people text me. They're going to start selling drugs and invest in Pacific edible seaweed, which is a surefire 400% return.
And you've been using that since 1981, I believe.
81 or 82, correct.
So anyhow, Richie, there was, by the way, I'm looking at my notes here, there was, in 1980s, 46% had private pensions, and now 18%. The 401k was not created until 1978. So that's how far along we are. I mentioned that employers are not covering healthcare costs as well.
So let me ask you 2 questions.
And then I want to talk about the global economy and why I'm worried about that as well.
Let me pull out another pillow.
To smother me?
So I can fall asleep after I smother you. So 2 things that are on people's minds all the time are, from a supplemental income standpoint, will Social Security still be there when I retire? And what safeguards are there for the people in the next 10 to 20 years versus, hey, who the heck knows? It could be 0, depending on what the government has to bail themselves out with regarding the deficit. So question number 1,
Yep.
Social Security.
So my personal opinion is that it's such a sacred cow. We've all been paying into it forcibly, by the way. I would to fix this country, by the way. I had to get some libertarian stuff in here.
Of course.
I would allow people to opt out of Social Security. I can't opt out of it now because I'm 55. I've been paying in for 30 some years. But it's an unfair system all the way around. It's a pay-go system. There is no Social Security trust fund, folks. There is no lockbox, as Al Gore said. It's a pay-go system. The current employees are paying the people that are retirees. And there's a crisis going where people are living a lot longer than they used to. And Social Security is offered at a very young age. It used to be only for people to have around for 5 years. Now people are collecting for 25 years. You're a math guy, Rich. The math just doesn't work. So you're right to be concerned about it, but my guess is that they're going to collect more Social Security because right now you only pay up until about $120,000 worth of income, then the FICA goes away. They're probably going to raise that. They're probably going to cut benefits for wealthy people. So I think it's such a sacred cow that they won't be able to cut it. You'll get something, but it'll become an ever decreasing part of retirement. In the 80s, it was about 45% of retirement income for people. Now it's much less. So.
What did you call this? Pay what?
PAYGO.
PAYGO. Is that like a pyramid scheme?
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, people would resent me saying that, but it is basically there is no money that's set aside. When it comes out of your check, it doesn't go into your account or anything like that. All the money that's collected isn't held, and it's basically just going right back out and paying the Social Security retirees.
So regarding pensions, right? I mean, they've, for the most part, gone away for the majority of U.S. citizens. They're still there for government workers, local and state and federal and unions.
Some employers, pharmaceuticals still have
utilities,
some pensions, utilities,
transportation, all that stuff.
Right.
But our equivalent is the 401k.
Correct.
Is there's any risk or danger with, we all think there's no way you can lose your money when it's sitting in a bank or a 401k. We'll look at the Great Depression. What are the safeguards for our money in the bank or 401ks?
I'm not perfectly fluent in all the laws around the SEC or whatever, but if you're in a bank, it's federally insured up to $500,000. If I believe that if you're in a Vanguard or a Schwab or a Fidelity, I believe that they also have some protections. Plus, they're also well-established companies. I think you're probably pretty safe there. The consensus among people is if you're not a investment professional, you should really invest in a diversity of funds that are very low costs, have very low expense ratios. Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, all would qualify for that. And you diversify it and you let it ride, and then you mix in some short-term money or whatever like that. So I don't think that's a big risk. I think the big risk is people miscalculating how much money they're going to need and how long they're going to live, because people are living longer and longer each year for the most part, although there's been a rash of suicides and opioid deaths the last couple of years. But overall, over the long time, American life expectancy is getting longer, and we should expect it to continue.
Well, as far as diversification, you gave me a great idea with Idiots of the Week on the last show, and I've joined the Nike Youth Sneaker Program. I'm spending $600 a year now.
It's the Adventure Club.
Yeah, the Adventure Club. I am investing $50 a month, but I'm not taking any of the sneakers out of the box with the expectation to sell them at a future date at double, triple the cost.
So, Richie, before we run out of time, I do want to talk about another reason I'm a little bit concerned about the future returns of the market. Not only are we at a 10-year high in the market, and so just logically you'd think that we're overdue for a recession and a drop, and no one knows when that's going to come, but we're at the top of the market, so how much higher can the market go? No one really knows. But I think the fundamentals are very poor in the world right now. And you've heard me rant about this on some of our text things, that debt is overwhelming us. We have $23 trillion in the U.S. of just debt. That doesn't even count the unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Around the world, as we tape this, there's $16 trillion in negative yielding bonds. So if you're not familiar with what that is, listeners, that's you give someone money, they hold it for a certain period of time, and then they give you less money back.
That sounds like a good deal.
It's a negative. It's a reverse investment.
Why wouldn't everybody do that?
Obviously the central banks around the world have been buying securities, buying bonds, manipulating assets for the last 10 years since the Great Recession. And I believe there's a huge amount of malinvestment going on all around the world. We have no idea what's going to cause the next downturn. People think it might be corporate debt, what have you, but no one ever knows. I remember Ben Bernanke saying how great a shape the housing market's in about a year before the housing market crashed in 2008. So even the supposedly smartest people in the world, they don't know. They don't know where the next trouble spot's going to come from. And just logically, if you have negative yielding bonds being sold all around the world, you know there's something wrong. There's definitely something, there's malinvestment going on. There's a debt bubble going on. We haven't talked about student loans or auto loans or all this other stuff. There's debt everywhere.
I said not to mention those.
And I'm just concerned that the fundamentals are so different from the past 100 years that these stock market indices, the historical performance measures are based on. I think we're in for a lower returns over a longer period of time market. That's just one idea. It's kind of where I'm leaning towards. I'm not discounting the fact that I could be wrong, but it is troublesome, some of the fundamentals of the global economy. Thoughts?
No argument. You're usually pretty good with this stuff, having a MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in economics.
You're off on all of that, but whatever. What do you think about the emotional aspects of investing with a spouse? So that's the last thing I wanted to bring up is, it's not just my ideas of how comfortable I am with investing. It's my wife's, right? And she has totally different ideas about things. And every couple has different ideas about things. It's rare to have a couple that believes the same way and thinks the same way. So how does that complicate managing your own retirement? Have you thought about that at all?
It complicates it a lot. I find more women are conservative versus men.
Right.
Men are a little bit, like cowboys and think they can come up with, and I'm to blame too. Hey, I can double my money quicker. If I do this, I think it's a good checks and balances system to have a spouse, especially on the wife's side, keep their men in check.
And you're right about that, by the way. I think there's been a lot of surveys that women actually, over the long haul, turn out to be better investors because they're more conservative and they're more diversified.
True, check. So I think it's a good thing for the guys out there because without the women, we are, again, investing in igloos in the Bahamas and Air Force jets that go in opposite circles of hurricanes and non-cutting chicken fillets.
So, Richie, the last thing I'd like to mention on this, because it's a little off topic, but I do think it's related. What about the emotional part of retirement? Meaning, and this is what you and I talked about on the beach a couple weeks ago, is, it's not necessarily related to managing your own money in retirement, but at some level it is because the decision is when to retire, when to give up on work. And you and I have a little bit of different ideas on this, and I frankly, I'm not sure when I want to stop working, but what about that aspect of retirement? How hard is that? I mean, we don't have mandatory retirement for the most part anymore, so you have to all choose when you want to retire, or maybe your health will dictate it. But how hard is that going to be for you? I think it's going to be a struggle for me deciding when to retire.
It's only going to be hard for me from a standpoint of when I think I have enough money.
So if you had enough money today, you retire?
I could handle it.
Really?
Yes. Because
that's interesting.
I don't get the love and the enjoyment that you do from the business world. For me, I have a lot more hobbies than you. You're fairly boring. And I could stay busy. We talked about that. All kidding aside, the more hobbies and interests and passions you have that you could dive into indefinitely, whether it's art, music, watching sports, building things, traveling, working out more often, cooking, on and on and on.
I have plenty of that you're miscategorizing. I'm figuring out you're not a very good listener. You're miscategorizing my quandary. My quandary is not that I don't have enough things to do. My quandary is that I don't think that those things will fulfill a certain bucket within me.
Well, I may not be a good listener, but you sure are a good interrupter. I didn't finish my statement.
Touche.
So it's going to be different for everybody depending on your prioritization of those. So, first of all, it comes down to how much cash do you have, right? I can't retire at age 59 and a half if I have $60 in the bank. So some of us are going to have to work until we're 64, 65. Some people, and a lot of people expect to work until they're 70. You, on the other hand, may enjoy working until you're 70.
Right.
So it really comes down to your passion. Some people are passionate about their jobs. They love their job. And if you do, then you can stay in it indefinitely. Other people that don't like their jobs are going to get out quicker. But how do you fill the time? We also talked about that. There are many people that retire and they die within 6 months of retirement. Or they retire and they just don't know what to do. So
Right.
It's an individual situation based on your hobbies, passions, and situation in life.
Yeah. And also, that's another thing where you have to kind of be on the same page with your spouse.
100%.
Yeah, that's another thing that's, because I think there's, not with you and I, because we work from our houses, so we probably see our spouses more than a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that are on the road for 40 years, and then they come home, and the wife's like, what are you doing here when you're retired? Like they don't want them around.
Or
I'm being sexist. It could be the wife on the road and the man at home, but whatever. What I'm saying?
I thought we weren't doing anything about gender anymore.
Ex-gender.
Ex-gender. But the reality is, then there's also potential resentment.
Right.
So one person's working while the other person is going to strip joints drinking Budweisers.
Right.
And that could be either gender as well.
That could be. Yes.
So there's a lot of factors, my friend.
That's why I'm worried, Richie. That's why this show was important to do. There's lots of concerns, and I'm probably overthinking it, but thank you for this counseling session today with the Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
I feel a lot better.
The bill is in the mail.
All right. We want to leave our listeners with some good news, folks, because as we mentioned, if you are willing to relocate and move to a different domicile, you like that word, then it can probably work out somehow if you change your lifestyle and adjust your lifestyle to your budget. Rich, I present to you U.S. News and World Report's analysts of the 100 largest metropolitan areas in the United States as potential retirement spots.
We're not going to go through all 100, are we?
No, I'm going to give the top 5. I just want to give you the criteria.
I can put my gun away.
Data about housing affordability, happiness, desirability, retiree taxes, the job market, access to health care were part of the criteria.
Okay,
so pretty
this
standard.
will be interesting.
Number 1, this will surprise you. Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
What?
Yeah. Up from number 2, Lancaster now tops the list of best places to retire due to increase in the housing affordability, overall happiness, and access to health care. I won't go through the whole thing, but yeah, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Well, there are a lot of 100-year-old Amish people, so that may make sense.
Fort Myers, Florida, number 2.
Not surprising.
And I'll just lump them together with number 3, Sarasota, Florida.
Not surprising.
You've mentioned St. Pete
Beach,
which is one of your favorites. But Fort Myers and Sarasota are not too far away, so it's a similar lifestyle. What are your thoughts on that area of the country? Let's hear your commercial, Rich.
I love the west coast of Florida for several reasons, especially kind of mid-west coast. First of all, it's not as hot as South Florida in the winter. It's not as prone to hurricanes on the west side. Most of them come up through the Caribbean and attack the east side. So the weather's great. 8 months a year. There's a good mix of commercial activity and also laid-back residential. So it's not too built up like a Center City metropolis, and it's not too laid-back like a Lancaster or farm country. So you have a nice mix. There's plenty of options, whether you're a golfer or you like restaurants and bars or you like yoga. I mean, there's just so many options. Right. It's outdoors, and the cost of living in a lot of these areas is much less than major cities around the country.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that U.S. News points out is there's no state tax in Florida, so that's another benefit for retirees. Number 4 on the list, Rich, Austin, Texas, which I've never been to. I've heard it's a really fun place. It's actually going up and getting a little bit more expensive, but it's still relatively inexpensive, certainly compared to the East Coast. And supposedly it's a really great music scene, probably second only to Nashville. And what do you think about Austin, Texas?
Coincidentally,
have you ever been there?
We just visited Austin. We did a trip to San Antonio, and we checked out Austin. This was, I guess, back in March or April. Yeah, great town.
High-tech town.
High-tech town.
You could probably get a job there working the phones, Richie.
You're right. Let me
This is
mark
Rich.
that
I'm your
one down.
inside sales rep.
Yeah, no, great suggestion. The only thing I disagree with, I didn't see it as a retiree town. I don't see Nashville as a retiree town either. It was more of a younger town, and a lot of
Right.
people told us it's going to be more of a young, nightlife, robust, up-and-coming city for, say, 25 to 40. So I didn't really view it as a retirement town, but I didn't see the whole place.
I think there's something to be said for when you get older being around young people, though. I mean, I don't want to go, just be around old people all the time, I guess.
I just don't
know.
picture you at 75 doing beer bongs and
Well, I
shouting
didn't
at the
do that
moon.
when I was 20. So, All right, Richie, number 5, Pittsburgh. So think about it. 2 of the top 5 are in Pennsylvania, our
Wow.
state. So that's pretty cool. And actually, over half the list contains cities in 3 states: Florida, Texas, and Pennsylvania. So we must be doing something right. We're living in a pretty good state. But Pittsburgh is big because they've converted into like a healthcare town from it used to be a steel town. And they have Carnegie Mellon there. They have a University of Pittsburgh. You get take free classes in the universities. Residents age 65 and older are eligible for free public transportation to get around. And the cost of housing there is very inexpensive. Average for 60-year-old is just $142,000 for a house.
Well, I actually love Pittsburgh. I think it's one of the biggest sleeper towns in the U.S. There's
Cold, though.
Well,
Cold.
that's what I'm getting at. I don't see this as a retiree town. I love visiting. I have friends that live there. I've done a lot of business in Pittsburgh. Great sports town. Right in Center City, Pittsburgh, you have the stadiums, casino. You got the rivers. It's a vibrant bar and restaurant scene now.
The Pirate Stadium's an awesome stadium. It's right there on the river.
Well, so is
Heinz Field.
Steelers are there,
Right.
and Penguins are right there.
Right.
Great college town as well. So I think it's a great city. I don't see it as a retiree town, and most people are trying to migrate to better weather. It's crappy, horrendous weather from, October, November to April.
Why do you associate retirement with better weather? That's not necessarily true. There's, people retiring to Wisconsin. Lancaster, Pennsylvania is number 1. So I don't necessarily see that, but I guess you're right that more people than not would prefer better weather, I guess.
Yes, well, especially as you get older with creaky bones, people tell you, go to Arizona with the dry heat, go to Florida where you can be outdoors, and people assume there's more health problems in cold weather.
I'll just go through them quickly because we're out of time. But number 6 was Grand Rapids, Michigan. Again,
No idea.
Another cold weather climb. Nashville, which
Love
you
Nashville.
don't see it.
Love it.
San Antonio, number 8.
Great city.
Dallas, I would never retire there because that would require hearing about the Cowboys a lot.
Good point.
And then Lakeland, Florida is
Well,
number 10.
anything in Florida, yes, get it.
I don't know. I don't like the Panhandle. I don't like Jacksonville. So I'd have to
West Coast of Florida.
Well, I like East Coast. I like East Coast and West Coast, but I think I'd probably prefer East Coast. But
You have no idea what you're talking about.
yes, I do.
Not
I've
about
been
the
there.
East Coast.
I've been there. I've been to both places.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.